Okay, so I'm going to share with you guys a little bit of what we call like the rationale or messages, the meaningful messages behind the mitzvah of tefillin. Okay, we always have to be very careful, when we're kind of like interpreting or choosing interpretations of the mitzvahs, because we don't really know why God said wrap leather straps on your arm. Like the commentaries and the rabbis teach us many different messages that we can learn from it, and we can use those messages to like feel good about it and connect, on a spiritual and mental level to the mitzvah. But God's got gazillions of reasons why He does anything. So we can't say definitively. But okay, I assume you learned from Rav Gil what's inside of the tefillin. Four parshas, right? Four sections of the Torah. What's the most famous one?
Shema.
The Shema. Okay, great. How many of you guys have heard the class on the 5 levels of pleasure? Okay, a handful. So in short, I'm going to ruin that class for you right now, okay? But because we don't have time to do that whole thing. But basically, Rav Noach Weinberg Zatzal, founding Rosh Yeshiva of Aish, so he developed a class called the 5 levels of pleasure, which basically look at different levels of pleasure in life. There's physical pleasure, there's love and companionship, there is a feeling of being good, there is creativity, number 2. Number 1 is transcendence, which is the top, which is basically connecting to God so that you can connect to all of those other levels in a very refined and pure and holy and productive way. Yeah? We all know we don't want to like get obsessed with like banana splits. You know what I mean? I know I look like I did maybe, but like, okay. So you don't want to live your life for 5th class pleasure. You want to live for 1st class pleasure, and then the rest of the pleasures will go along with it. Where do we learn that from? Where do we see that? We see that actually in the Shema. Rav Noach used to teach that it goes into the Shema. You should love the Lord your God. That's number 1. B'chol levavcha, with all of your hearts. What's hearts? Double, 2 hearts? Yeah. Your sense of good, that's creativity, that's being good, and your sense of passion, which can be negative, your yetzer hara, but move it into, channel that energy in a positive way. So that's 1, 2, and 3. Number 4, b'chol nafshecha, with all of your soul, that's love. And number 5, b'chol meodecha, with all of your resources, Chazal teach us, which means to use your physical resources, also for loving God. So the Shema is one of the mainstays of it's basically in a certain way kind of like the mission statement of the Jewish people. That's why we say it every morning and every night before we go to bed. A Jew says it on their deathbed, right? The Shema is what we teach our kids, every morning. We put it in the mezuzah and we put it in the tefillin, right? Because that idea of living with God and imbuing that into everything that we do is something that we want to live with all the time. Every doorway we go through, every morning when we wake up, every night when we go to sleep, right? We want that to be our mantra constantly, to live 1st class pleasure, not for a lower class pleasure, yeah? And part of the idea is that the tefillin keeps that with us. In the old days, they used to wear tefillin not for a half hour, 45 minutes, in a quick, for a quick davening in the morning. They would wear tefillin all day long, not at night, but all day long. Can you imagine? Imagine, like those, the marks you'd have on your arm after a whole day wearing a tefillin, right? So, but they would wear it all day long. Why? Part of the rationale is because since they carried this message of the Shema, the mission statement of the Jewish people, it was something that you wanted to have with you all the time. The 4 parshas that appear in the tefillin in the head and on the arm are basically split into 2 basic themes. Okay, those basic themes are number 1, what we call Yichud Hashem, that there's one God. The God is the oneness, the unity of everything, right? And that we should love that God and we should live with that God. And that if we live with that God, there will be reward and punishment. Reward for the good that we do and punishment for the bad that we do. And that's part of how a Jew lives. And the second theme is basically Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus of Egypt, right? Which is not just that God exists and that we should live with God, but that God is involved in our lives, right? That just like God took us out of Egypt, but so too in every generation, He is involved, He's looking after us, He cares about us, and that's also a mentality that we want to cover with us, keep us all the time. That mentality is something which is, like I said, supposed to kind of like pervade our whole consciousness. And it's not just a head thing, right? Meaning if you look at, I actually heard this from Rabbi Ellis, this is a beautiful idea, that the way that the tefillin is structured, right? Where do we put it? Head, wraps around here to the back, and then the straps come down, right? To the body, right? Onto the heart, right on the arm, right across from the heart, and then all the way out to the fingertips, right? Representing that our consciousness should completely control everything else, the rest of our body's actions. Yeah, that consciousness of God's oneness, of God's holiness, of God's involvement in our life should pervade everything that we do, not just the way we think. And this is manifest even in some of the laws, right? We have to keep our body clean. The rabbis teach us when we wear tefillin. What does that mean? It means you're not supposed to pass gas, and if you have to go to the bathroom, so you go to the bathroom first and then put them on. Like the idea is that it's almost a certain refinement of our whole body, right? If you think about like the Jewish people as this unique, as having our unique role, right, amongst world religions. So you have some religions which are very into like their partying, right? And you have some religions that are very into like divorcing themselves from the physical world. And we are a religion that says, no, we can embrace the physical world. We want to elevate it, right? So this is kind of the idea. The idea is that my consciousness, my seichel, my awareness of why I'm living, of my connection to God, is meant to influence my actions. And this is expressed in a very almost kind of funny way by the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch is a book that goes through all the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah and gives you like a little synopsis of each one and then tells you a rationale behind why we do that mitzvah. Okay, again, you always have to kind of like say like, it's a good suggestion, like we don't know definitively, but he writes as follows. I'm going to quote to you from the English. He writes as follows. Man is a physical being and drawn after the physical world and pulled after his desires. For this is the nature of materialism, to desire all pleasant things, like an animal, unless the soul, which the Creator graced him with, will hold him back. Since man dwells here on earth and is very far from his soul's natural habitat in heaven, the soul needs many guards to protect it from its evil neighbor, the body. You never looked at your body like that, right? Like the evil neighbor. Okay. Who is more powerful and living in its natural habitat. For this reason, God gave us heroic guards all around, such as that we should speak constantly in the words of Torah. We place tzitzis on the four corners of our clothing. We have a mezuzah on our doorposts and tefillin on our hands and heads. These guard us not to stray after our eyes, after our hearts. And for this reason, he happens to point out that in the temple, that the priests and Levites did not have to wear tefillin while they were there because they were so surrounded by the environment of consciousness of God, of closeness to God, that they didn't need such reminders. They were living in the place in this world that's, like, I guess, the closest to the world to come, in a sense. So, therefore, it wasn't really necessary. So, this is basically the idea that tefillin, represent this reminder of the proper consciousness that we're supposed to have. I believe the Derech Hashem writes about it as like part of the Jewish uniform. Like the same way a soldier, which army he identifies with, Ukraine or Russia, whatever. Like you know which side he's on based on his uniform. So too, we know which side we're on, by having our uniform, our tefillin. Again, in the old days they used to wear it every day, all day. Our tefillin and our tzitzit or talis. Okay, so that's one basic rationale behind this idea of tefillin, behind the mitzvah of tefillin. Now, there is another deeper idea as well. Okay, you ready? What's the greatest mitzvah? What's the greatest mitzvah that we have? Chesed is a great mitzvah.
Believing in one God.
Talmud Torah, what?
Believing in one God.
Believing in one God? Okay, good. We could actually probably have a whole day's worth of discussions as to what's the greatest mitzvah. So there are many different ways to go, but what's your name?
Ryan.
Brian? Brian. Okay, so I'm going to go with Brian for now because I have a source. You have a good point. If you didn't believe in God, then you wouldn't learn Torah, right?
You can do multiple gods.
Yeah, maybe. You shouldn't.
One God.
Okay. Yeah, one God and wanting to learn His wisdom, so that's, we'll put those together, okay? So there we go. So our rabbis teach us, right, we say this in the morning blessings every day, that Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that learning Torah is one of the greatest of mitzvahs. So there is actually a fascinating connection between the concept of Talmud Torah and and the mitzvah of Tefillin. Many of the laws, and probably as Rav Gil pointed out, many of the laws about Tefillin are what we call halacha l'Moshe miSinai. Why are Tefillin black? Anybody know? I don't know either. You know why? God said so. We don't say that about a lot of things. We usually like to understand what the rationale is. The verse says this, the verse says that. But we know that there was a tradition when Moses was up on Mount Sinai, God told him certain things, and it basically was like, this is the way I want it. For some reason, God wanted tefillin black. Like you can imagine, like somebody's trying to put together like some pink tefillin, maybe. They might sell it at like some shul gift shops or whatever, for the bat mitzvah, or they might try to sell it, I don't know, like to some celebrities, put on like rainbow colored tefillin or whatever, But no, according to the halacha, it's supposed to be black. Okay, what is this idea of it being connected to what God told Moshe? So there's a very unique expression in the Torah. The Torah says, when it says about the tefillin, there should be a sign on your hand and a remembrance between your eyes, in order that the Torah of Hashem should be in your mouth. Uman tia Torahs Hashem b'ficha. So the Torah of God should be in your mouth, because with an outstretched hand, God took you out of Egypt. So in some way, wearing tefillin, equals having Torah in your mouth. Interesting. So what is that about? So let's explore. The Talmud in Masechet Rosh Hashanah tells us that there's a category of a sinner called Poshei Yisrael Begufan, Jews who are liable with their bodies. And the Gemara goes on to define that as somebody who did not wear tefillin, a skull that did not put tefillin on it. It's a little bit of a debate. Does that mean even one time? Does it mean his whole life? But we'll leave that aside as to how to define that. There is a tradition that for people who missed a day of tefillin, they can, in a sense, make it up by helping other people put on tefillin. So sometimes you'll see a newcomer come to Aish and he's like, he wants to try it out. You help him out, there you go. You made up a day, So that's maybe part of why, the guys at the Kotel are throwing tefillin on everybody all the time, So in any case. So there in the commentaries on the Talmud, it says there's this person who goes to Gehenna. They go to hell basically, and we don't know if they're going to get out. This person, this Poshei Yisrael Begufan. But the Tosfos over there, one of the commentaries says, but that's not true if it's somebody who learned Torah. What does that mean? Some way learning Torah can replace tefillin, and it seems like tefillin in a certain way can replace learning Torah. How is that? So there's a beautiful midrash on Tehillim that says that the Jewish people declare to God, Hashem, we want to learn Torah day and night. We love you so much. We appreciate your wisdom so much. We want to learn Torah all day. We want to learn Torah all night. But what can we do? We're only human beings. We have to sleep at night. We have to work during the day. We have to provide for our families. We got stuff to do. We can't learn Torah all the time. We can't sit there all the time. So what are we supposed to do? So Hashem answers them, don't worry. Wear tefillin, and I will consider it like you're learning all day and all night. Fascinating. It's a fulfillment of that verse, so that the Torah of God should be in your mouth. How does that work? So, Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch from Germany, from the 1800s, he writes a very beautiful idea. He says, what is the meaning behind the placement of the tefillin? The idea of the tefillin, he says, being on the head, right above the hairline, is right on top of the frontal lobe of the brain. And the tefillin of the yad, the tefillin on the arm, is right on the bicep, right? He says these are the control centers of the body. A little bit like we mentioned before, right? The frontal lobe is going to completely control a person's focus, their mental activity, and their thinking and their orientation. And the bicep, represents, if I can't lift my arm like this if my bicep's not working, right? I have other muscles that I can use, whatever, I can grab things, whatever, but to pull it up to here, right? I can't completely function if my bicep is dysfunctional, and in a certain way, right? What else is bicep? You guys all work out. What does it represent? Strength, right? So what am I doing? I'm kind of like subjugating my mental prowess and my physical prowess to God. These are the control centers of the body, both mentally and physically. And so therefore, Rav Hirsch says that, by wearing tefillin, the idea of wearing tefillin on our control centers is basically us saying, I'm subjugating myself to God. What do we learn Torah for? Why do we learn Torah all the time? We want to subjugate our lives to God. We want to follow God's wisdom. God said, here's my wisdom. Here's a whole layout of laws and principles of how to live in the world, how to get along with people, how to run an agricultural society, how to run business according to a moral, ethical way. God's wisdom in Torah is giving us a direction for all of, everything we can do to live a better life, right? If I can't learn Torah all day, even though I would love to, how do I show God that I'm really fully dedicated to Him? The tefillin are this declaration, are this uniform that shows my loyalty, my commitment, my subjugation to God's wisdom, to God's will. Okay. And this is actually manifest, I think, also in a very fascinating halacha. We know that when you take out your tefillin, which one do you put on first? The arm, right? And then we put on the head one. Now, wait a second. You say, Rabbi Greene, I don't get it. If the arm one is supposed to represent action and the head one is supposed to represent mentality, so which one comes first? Both. Oh, okay, you guys are too Aishi. Okay, both make sense, but how are you going to put on both at the same time? But don't finish putting on your arm. Okay, nice. Okay, so I would think that the head one would go in first, right? Meaning normally, right? We all know physically this is the way it works, right? The brain has to command certain the nerves and the synapses and whatever. Everything has to go in order to me to put things into action, right? So I would think head should go first and then arm, right? Why arm and then head?
I would say because action speaks more than thoughts.
Action speaks more than thoughts. Okay, good. I'm happy you said that. Okay, and where else do we see that in Jewish history? That we express our action commitment more than our thoughts?
When they were at the splitting of the sea.
Close, a little bit after that?
Nasa v'nishma.
Also, okay, that's true. Okay, that's what I had in mind. Yeah. I mean, you're right. You're correct. I didn't think of that. So I thought there was only one spot. But I had in mind, Nasa v'nishma, right? What was Nasa v'nishma? When the Jews are sitting at Mount Sinai and they're accepting the Torah and they're saying, God, don't worry, our actions are going to be committed to you. Yeah? So Nasa, we will take action, v'nishma, and then we'll learn. We are putting our mentality second. It's not that we're going to think about it and then maybe we'll commit ourselves to you. No, our actions are committed, and then secondarily, we will start to learn about it and understand it in a deeper level, right? What happens every morning when we take our tefillin out? We put on our arm first. What are we saying, God? Nasa, Hashem, I am committed to you. I am loyal to you. My actions are dedicated to you. V'nishma, and then I'll put on my shalrosh, and then I'll put on the head tefillin, right? When we put on our tefillin every morning, L'ma'antia Torah Hashem b'ficha, so that the Torah of God will be in your mouth, we are reenacting on a little personal way a relationship with God and saying, Hashem, I am re-accepting the Torah now, just like the Jews at Mount Sinai. Nasa v'nishma. Isn't that powerful? Isn't that beautiful? Every Jew has his little Har Sinai every single day. Okay, and this is part of this is expressed also in a unique in some of the unique halachos. You have the tefillin shel yad is pointed inwards, right? Why is that pointed inwards? Because this is private. In fact, many of us were supposed to kind of cover it, right? Cover the shel yad. Shel rosh out in the open. Even a married guy who puts a tefillin, a talis on his head, or a Sephardi guy, yeah, it's not supposed to cover the tefillin shel rosh. The tefillin shel rosh is out there. What is that about? That's about the dual relationship that we have with God. Every Jew has his personal relationship with Hashem. It's private. It's between me and Hashem. When I'm davening, there are things nobody else is going to hear me say to God, right? But then there's a national, a more communal type of a role also. I have to be involved in the Jewish people. I have to go out there and make a Kiddush Hashem. I have to show the world about the Torah and its ethical teachings. So that is out there in the open. That I don't cover. There's a story about the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon was one of the great tzaddikim in the late 1700s, I'd say. And he was traveling. He used to travel from village to village. And Gemara says that when a person is in exile, it atones for his sins. So he used to exile himself. He'd leave his family, go on a trip, and people wouldn't know who he was. He was like a total stranger. So he was this Jew who was in a town somewhere in Europe. And the anti-Semitic, non-Jews over there said, "Oh, let's get this poor Jew. We'll trump him up on some charges. We'll throw him in jail. We'll ransom him for some money." And they bring him into the court. It's all trumped up, and the Vilna Gaon was extraordinarily humble. So he was just standing there, kind of say what you want. I didn't do anything wrong, whatever it is. And the judge says, "Let me see your face." And the Vilna Gaon looks up, and his tefillin shel rosh is sticking out there, and the judge gets crazy frightened. He's like, get out of here. Just go free, just go free. What is that about? That is about the pasuk. The verse says that when we wear the tefillin, that it's an expression of v'ra'u kol amei haaretz. All the nations of the world will see Kishem Hashem nikra alecha, that the name of God is called upon you. V'yeira'u mimeka, and they will fear you. That is this idea of the kind of more external Jewish role of carrying God's name on our shoulders, right? That we are actually labeled, literally, right? That uniform literally labels us with God's name, right? How do we tie the knot over here? We have a shin, right? We have the knot over here, I'm sorry, right, on the fingers we have the dalet, right? And we have the yud in the back, right? Shin, dalet, and yud, right? That spells out a name of God. We are actually walking around with God's name on us when we're wearing the tefillin. Right, so we are labeled with God's name, and we are proclaiming that in a certain way to the world. In fact, God's name appears in the parshas of the Tefillin 21 times. Tefillin Shel Yad 21, Tefillin Shel Rosh 21 times. 21 and 21 equals 42. 42 is also, there's one of the names of God, one of the that we don't know how to pronounce, we can't pronounce it, we're not supposed to pronounce it, is the 42-letter name. And it's supposed to represent that. In fact, the 21 and the 21 is also representative of God's expression to Moshe when God tells Moses, go to Egypt and take the Jewish people out. And Moses is like, I don't know what's going to be though, Paro is not going to let, what does God say to Moshe? He says, Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh, I will be what I will be. So there are people who don't even say that. They say Akiyah Asher Akiyah because the Ehiyeh is similar to the Yud Kei Vav Kei name, like God's name. What's the gematria of Ehiyeh? I will be. Aleph is 1, Hey is 5, Yud is 10, Hey is 5, it's 21. Ehiyeh Asher Ehiyeh. That is the name of God. 21 and 21, 42. God's name is all over us. When we are wearing the tefillin. Okay. And this is all a part of this, like I said, this relationship that we have with God, where we are wearing our tefillin as a symbol of, let's say, mental and physical loyalty and commitment to God. And in a certain way, that commitment is expressed back as well. There's a story in the Gemara, Masechah Shabbos, about a man named Rabbi Elisha Baal Knafayim. Rabbi Elisha, the owner of the wings. Now, what is this? What does this mean? So there was once a decree by the Roman government that they would not let Jews perform mitzvahs, and certainly not in public. And wearing tefillin in public was obviously a big crime. This Rabbi Elisha was a big tzaddik, and he didn't want to listen to the Romans, so he was wearing his tefillin like a regular guy, out in the open, and and he's walking through the street. This Roman guard sees him wearing his tefillin, and he says, "Hey, Jew, get over here." So he runs away, he runs around the corner, pulls off his tefillin, and hides them behind his back. The Roman guard catches up to him. He says, what do you have behind your back? He says, dove wings. He's like, dove wings? He's like, yeah, dove wings. He's like, let me see. And Elisha, the Gemara says, pulls out his hand, and sure enough, in his hand are dove wings. What is going on with that? And so the Pashup shot in the Gemara, simple understanding, is that God did a miracle for him, just to save him from the Roman government. What's a deeper pshat? So there's a book there's a book on Perek Shira, which addresses different character traits of different animals. Right? We know even already from the Torah the story of Noah. Right? What happened? Who did he send out to go see if there's land out there? First, he sent out a raven. Right? Why did the raven not do its job? Because the Medrash says because he was worried that Noah was going to hook up with his wife. Okay? The bird raven, whatever. Let's not get into that. So the raven came back, didn't do its job. Fine. So then Noah said, okay, let me send out the dove. Why the dove? Explains Rabbi Slifkin, who runs he's called the zoo rabbi. So he researches all sorts of Torah references to animals. So he says the dove is the only monogamous animal that exists. They have a mate that they stick with for their entire lives, and monogamy. The dove represents true dedication, true commitment. Rabbi Elisha Baal Knafayim says, I don't care what the Roman government says. I'm going to wear my tefillin. I'm going to show my commitment to God in a private way, in a public way. This is my commitment to God. And God says, you're loyal to me. I'm going to stay loyal to you. And they turned into dove wings because the tefillin also represent that unique, beautiful relationship, that marriage, in a sense, between Hashem and the Jewish people. What do we say every day when we put it on our finger? We're putting a ring on our finger. I will be betrothed to you forever. I will be betrothed to you with righteousness and justice and goodness and mercy, right? All the good traits. And I will be betrothed to you forever. That's what we're declaring to God. How much we love him, how much we're betrothed to him. We're marrying ourselves to God every day. That Mount Sinai happening every day. Mount Sinai was like a chuppah. It was held over their heads, like a canopy, like a wedding canopy. And so too does God show his commitment to us with a miracle like Elisha Baal Knafayim. Okay, that doesn't happen every day, but it shows that dove love relationship is what exists between us and Hashem. And not only that, but the Talmud says that you know who else wears tefillin? Hashem himself wears tefillin. The Gemara asks, what does it say in God's tefillin? Because in our tefillin it says the Shema. It says about how Hashem loves us, right? It says that we accept that God is one God and that we're going to love God and that we remember, we have a mitzvah to remember that God took us out of Egypt. So it's all about our responsibilities to God. Well, you know what it says in God's tefillin? The Gemara in Bracha says, it says in God's tefillin, Mi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. When we say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You know what Hashem is having in his tefillin say? It says, who is like you, O the Jewish people? You are a singular people in the whole world. No other nation is like you. The tefillin represents that complete fidelity and consciousness of love between Hashem and the Jewish people. And when we wear a tefillin and we betroth ourselves every single day to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we should feel that we're being makabel the Torah. We should feel that we're l'mantia Torah Hashem b'ficha, that the Torah is in our mouths, the Torah is in our head, and it's directing every part of our actions. And with that love and connection to Hashem should see us through every part of our day. Shkoyach for listening.